Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. In a few short minutes, we'll get started with the webinar. I wanted to wait a few seconds just to let others hop on. So just hang tight for a few minutes and then we'll get started with the presentation. For those of you who have just popped on, we're going to wait just another minute or so and let others join us, and then we will get started. Okay, everyone, I want to welcome you to today's webinar titled Using Standards of Practice to Develop Effective Prevention and Harm Reduction Initiatives. My name is Emma, and I'll be the moderator for today. I'm the Assistant Director for the Illinois Higher Education Center for Alcohol, Other Drug, and Violence Prevention, or you probably know it as IHEC. It's a lot shorter, easier to say. I'm very excited to host this event today, and I know that we'll all learn a lot. Before I introduce our speakers and hand over the microphones to them, I have a few little housekeeping things I'd like to go over about today's webinar and the GoToWebinar platform itself. If any of you are new to using GoToWebinar, you're listening through your computer's speaker system by default, whether that's your laptop with speakers, desktop, headphones, whatever the case may be. All attendees will be muted for today's program, but that doesn't mean that you still can't participate. So we highly encourage you to participate during the webinar. You can ask questions at any time. Our presenters may prompt you to give some feedback, so we'd love for you to do that as well. We really encourage that. On the little control panel on the right, you'll see a question little drop-down box. The question box is where you will go to type in any of the feedback that you're asked to give or any questions that you may have throughout the presentation. You can do this at any time, and if you do have questions, we can either get to them right then during the conversation, or we'll have time at the end to answer questions as well. Today's webinar will be available on demand after this live session, so if you really enjoyed the webinar and you think you know someone else who might have enjoyed to listen to it as well, and if we usually get it on our website in about a few days, so you can go to eiu.edu/IHEC, and then once you're there, go to past webinars, and you'll be able to find a recording so you can share it if you think anybody would find it useful. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Sarah Menenfi and Alicia Chakowski.
Good morning, IHEC. Thank you so much for having us. We are excited to participate today. My name is Alicia Chakowski. I am the Director of Public Health Initiatives and Assessment at Tulane University.
And I'm Sarah Menifee. I am a lecturer of public health at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia.
One thing that may be helpful to note from both of us is we are both past section chairs of the health promotion section for the American College Health Association, who publishes the standards of practice for health promotion in higher education. And we are both currently on the committee that is in the process of updating the standards of practice.
And just a little more background from me as well in terms of my roles in health promotion. I worked for 10 years at William and Mary in the Office of Health Promotion, with about half of those being dedicated towards substance abuse prevention before I switched to my teaching role about 2 years ago. So alcohol was my focus for many years in health promotion, and Alicia's as well.
Yes, yeah, I have been at multiple institutions, including at Northern Illinois University. So I was once a very active member of IHEC and have overseen alcohol and other drugs and education at multiple institutions. So without further ado, let us start. So we thought it might be helpful to give you all a little bit of background on the standards of practice. So very brief history. Way back in May of 1996, the American College Health Association brought together the Task Force on Health Promotion in Higher Education. And the members of this task force worked to develop a assessment called the National Survey on Health Promotion and Education in Institutions of Higher Education, a mouthful. And they mailed it out to 600 random ACHA member institutions and then 97 key best practice health promotion leaders. They had a great response rate. About 75% of the institutions responded and 91% of the key informants responded. And they used this information to develop the very first standards of practice in 2001.
And since then, the standards have been updated a couple of times, as you can see on your slide, in 2005 and 12. But Alicia and I are really excited because we are a part of a 6-person team who is currently updating the standards. We're really pleased about the direction they're heading. So hopefully by the annual meeting of the American College Health Association in May, we will have a new published document for you. And just a note about where we're headed today, even though we are updating the standards, today's presentation will be based on the current standards, and then we're happy to come back and update you guys on the new ones.
Definitely. And there will be a lot that today that is going to be transferable, even with the updates with the standards. We also wanted to share that there's a couple of other publications that can be used in conjunction with the standards of practice. So there's the Guidelines of Hiring Health Promotion Professionals in Higher Education and the website Vision into Action, which both utilize the standards of practice. And once the standards of practice are updated, finished being updated this year, then the committee will go back and actually be updating both of these two documents as well. If you want to know a little bit more about the development, there is a article available through the Journal of American College Health, where you can read much more about the history so that we don't have to really get into the nitty-gritty of that today.
So as we move into looking at our first standard, I just want to point out that this is the format that all of them will be in. There are 7. And so there's an overarching theme or title for the standard, but then there are bullets below it with different objectives within them. And just so as you might look at these and think, wow, they expect me to do an awful lot. You know, we do want to make sure we're clear that these are kind of like a gold standard. They're what we ascribe to. We're not saying that you're not doing great work if you're not able to check every box of what we're saying. But as we think about ascribing to them, you know, we'll show you today how we believe they really help us think about our best alcohol prevention programming. So we're going to come back to the first one. So we'll focus on 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. So when we think about 1.2 and designing initiatives that are supporting student success, some ideas of how to do that are to look at things like retention at your institution and think about whether there's anything that you could link to your alcohol programming that impacts retention. So perhaps students taking medical withdrawals or leave of absences, maybe someone not graduating in 4 years as well. So thinking about those kind of larger indicators that our institutions often care a ton about and thinking about how health impacts those.
And then also, you know, the last couple really are focusing a lot on advocacy. I mean, honestly, we could spend an entire webinar discussing advocacy with you. So just in general, thinking about how you can align your missions, your visions of your health promotion program with that of your institution, so that it's very easy for you to then say, hey, this is how the work of my program can be used to fulfill the mission of this institution, and really use that information to create the reasoning for why you should continue to exist. We know why you should continue to exist, but sometimes upper administration may not always, and this is a great way to kind of tie your work back to that of the entire institution.
If you're able to successfully do 1.3, that also will impact 1.4. So demonstrating what you've done, demonstrating your successes, even tooting your own horn when you have those successes will in effect help you advocate for your work as core to the institution. We see within our health promotion section of ACHA, we continually see advocacy as something folks want to learn more about. And like Alicia said, even though it's huge, we still think it's important to remember how vital it can be to the success of all of your health programming, particularly alcohol prevention.
So now we'll pop back up to the top and we'll look at 1.1, talking about developing a strategic plan. So many of you out there may have already had experience developing a strategic plan or be part of a committee, either part of your division or part of your department doing a strategic plan. But kind of when you're sitting back and you're thinking about it, look at what your institution's mission and vision are, or look at what your departmental mission and vision are. That's kind of your base. Then thinking about your program and specifically your alcohol and substance abuse initiative, think about how that work ties back to all of those things. Then when moving forward to really start thinking about your strategic plan, look at your data. You'll hear us talk about data a couple times, but really emphasize that. What does your data say? Whether you're collecting things through the National College Health Assessment, or you're doing satisfaction surveys, or you're doing pre and post tests, what does your data say about the initiatives that you're working on? This way you can actually, as you're developing your strategic plan, make sure that it's measurable and you can see if you're achieving your goals. So I'm going to show you an example of one of the strategic plans that I worked on at a previous institution. Next. So while I was at Columbia, We did a full-on departmental strategic plan, and at the time I was overseeing all of our alcohol and other drug initiatives. So when I started my logic model to help feed into our strategic plan, start up, okay, what is our mission? What is our institution's mission? And then how does our departmental mission feed into that? So then I built our happy alcohol and other drugs logic model. Really looking at our inputs, what do we already have, what are we doing, what are our resources, what activities are we doing, and then to our outputs, what are really kind of our short, medium, long-term goals. And I did not use the original version here because the original version of this has lots of arrows that go every which way, pointing about how the different outputs then move into our short, medium, long-term goals, but then honestly, it's not readable at that point. So I did the cleaned up version for the purposes of our webinar today, but all of this kind of goes back to our departmental mission and our institution mission. And wanting to make sure that everything kind of feeds back into that.
If I can just brag on Alicia for just a hot second, because I just think this is, first of all, I think a logic model is so user-friendly. It's just so straightforward that I think it really translates beyond your individual department, but also it includes very measurable outcomes. So for example, reducing percentages of students reporting experiencing negative consequences associated with AOD use. So from that strategic plan, Alicia can use data and go back and show that her inputs and activities did lead to her short and her slightly longer term outcomes. I just think this is awesome and would love to see people follow that. I think it's, like I said, just so user-friendly.
Also, it was pretty easy to put together. So if you're trying to do something like this yourself, I did this in PowerPoint. And just it's one PowerPoint slide with lots of different images or text boxes in it. So pretty easy. You don't need to be a graphic designer to do something like this. So let's pop into standard number 2.
Great. And I'm not sure if we said this at the beginning, but if anyone has questions along the way, feel free to type them in, and we're happy to pause if we move too quickly on something. So our second standard is about socio-ecological based practice, which I think is maybe better if we go to the next slide and look at the visual, and then we'll come back to the wording and the standards. So our socio-ecological models tell us that behavior is influenced and influences multiple levels. So typically ecological models, even though if you Google one, you'll come up with a variety of graphics, typically all of them are centered around an individual and involve an individual level, an interpersonal level, some sort of either organizational or community level, and then our outer one is policy. And sometimes you'll also see grouped with policy some more structural factors, so SES, for example, or more of our social determinants on that outer circle. And with our alcohol programming, we want to make sure we're hitting all levels of the socio-ecological models. So a lot of times it's tempting to stay at that individual level where we're impacting things like knowledge or skills, but we want to make sure we acknowledge all of the different influences that come to someone's behavior of high-risk drinking. So as you see on the right-hand side, we have some examples of different programs that would target the different levels of the socio-ecological model. So we do want individual level programming. So an example is basics, so something that's going to impact knowledge or skills of that individual. We also want to impact our interpersonal levels, so our relationship between people. So our example for that is a bystander intervention where someone would intervene on behalf of someone else if they've had too much to drink. Moving up to our either organizational or community level, we would think about norms that can impact high-risk drinking in our community. Often we use social marketing to combat those norms and try to help students realize that high-risk drinking is typically in a smaller percentage of our population. It's just where we draw our attention. And if we go to this outer level, any campus and community policy, we would also think about our minimum legal drinking age as a policy that impacts behavior. So what our standard tells us is that we should be focused on all levels of the socio-ecological model, and we should prioritize our population level initiatives. So as we move out on that model, we have what we might think of as more bang for our buck, and things like policy being so impactful on behavior that we want to make sure we're focused on population level initiatives and not only looking at our individual level interventions.
And in fact, you can see when you look at the standards, standard 2.3 actually really calls out that focus on the population level initiatives, because traditionally we haven't, as health promotion practitioners, always been at that table for helping with the population level initiatives, that the policy development, and wanting to make sure that it's there. We have it in our standards of practice, so that as we're advocating for ourselves to be at that table, we can use the standards to say, hey, you know what, I should be here too to talk about the prevention side of things.
And I struggled sometimes with folks at my institution wanting me to, for example, go speak to a hall and increase knowledge about alcohol, go speak to a freshman hall, for example. And I think this is a great standard, like Alicia said, to advocate not just for being at the policy table, but also for why education alone or classroom-based education alone is not sufficient to solve a complex public health problem like high-risk drinking. So to use this to advocate for the multi-pronged approaches that we all are likely doing, but to advocate for the importance of all of them and hitting each level of the socio-ecological model in order to have the best chance of impact on our campuses. Exactly. One tool that's really we think is helpful for this is the NIAAA's Matrix. I hope folks are familiar with it. Though I can't ask you to raise your hands and tell me that. I hope you're familiar. If you're not, it's a wonderful resource, really user-friendly. One of the reasons we wanted to highlight it at this point in the standards is to think about how even within the matrix, they break out strategies that you can use into individual and the higher population level. So it can help you think about interventions that you can combine at multiple levels of that socio-ecological model.
And one of the nice things about this tool is, if you didn't know it, it's free, it's available online, so anyone can use it. You don't need special passwords or anything to get access to it.
And if we haven't convinced you yet, I think we highlighted at least 3 more times in the presentation. So hopefully by the end, we will convince you of its value.
So now we're going to pop into Standard 3, which is all about collaborative practice. And I really think what this one gets at is that a lot of the times, and you may have experienced this at your own institution, is sometimes it feels as though the health promotion people, we do the health stuff. But alcohol and other drug interventions, prevention, response, it cannot just fall on one person or just on one department. It really does need to be, as it says in the first one, the responsibility of everyone, because everybody is going to end up playing a role in that, whether it's something like a coalition, a task force, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a permanent, it meets every month, every other week task force. it could be something that happens biannually. So I'm thinking, I know that Eric Davidson does a lot with the biennial review. This is something that I have been in charge of at the last 2 institutions I have been at. And it's a committee that I bring together basically once every other year so that we can write up the biennial review. And it involves myself, it involves folks from our residential life, our conduct office, our counseling department, the academic side of things. So there is a whole group of us that come together and we write this report. But it really kind of showcases the fact that this is something that all of us work on, and it is not just my responsibility, even though I'm the one that kind of convenes this group together.
On my campus, we use a Healthy Campus 2020 coalition, and for anyone who's less familiar with the Healthy Campus structure, it's through the American College Health Association, and on their website, they have national goals and objectives that you can use to set on your own campus. So for us, we took the goals and objectives and used our own campus data to create our own goals of how we wanted to see reductions and improvements in health outcomes. And it's called Healthy Campus 2020 because the goals are by the year 2020, and then that's next year. So next year we should have a new set of goals and objectives. But the one advantage of this for me was being able to highlight some of the goals around alcohol prevention and have it come to a much broader audience. So a lot of times with coalitions, you might try to get people around the table on purpose. You might think of someone specific on your campus that you think would be a champion for you, and then invite them to the table where you're able then to highlight the work you're doing, the work that needs to be done, how everyone can work together to achieve those common goals, which is again why I like the Healthy Campus 2020 platform for that, because it kind of rallies the group around the common goals. We thought maybe it would be interesting to see if you were able to type in some of the stakeholders on your campus who you might want to work with or partner with or bring to the table for a coalition around your alcohol prevention goals. So if everyone could take a second and type those in for us, we thought we'd see if we had any consensus or any unique elements on a certain campus.
Yeah, so everyone can just open that question box and then you can type in your response. Right, so we do have one. We have residential life and public safety.
Those are both great examples. Anyone else want to share folks on your campus? Oh,
Another one.
We also have residential life again, student conduct, academic, deans and advisors, and campus police.
Nice.
I see another one, but I can't scroll to it for some reason.
It is Dean of Students, Student Affairs, and Academic Affairs.
I know the one that's kind of unique to the campus I'm currently on is we actually have a student group who are EMTs. So it's Tulane EMS. They work with our medical director, and so we partner very heavily with this specific student group because they're all trained Louisiana EMTs.
I like the addition in these suggestions of the academic folks as well, because I think even thinking back to Standard 1 where we talked about, tying alcohol prevention into student success. I think, ultimately student success often revolves around, on college campuses, often revolves around academics. So thinking about, potential impacts on academics, I know on our campus we have our last day of classes is a high-risk drinking day, especially in the spring. Our seniors tend to celebrate a little bit their last day of classes, and it absolutely trickles into our academic faculty who are potentially seeing intoxicated students in their classrooms. Some of them are canceling class because they're trying to avoid this, so almost being permissive to it. And we've even hear stories of faculty kind of condoning and hyping it up even more than it's already hyped about students drinking on a really high-risk day.
We also had another one right in athletics.
That's a good one.
Yes.
I want to piggyback on what Sarah was just saying. For if anybody there has a large graduate population, one of the things that we've been working with our graduate schools on is maybe specifically our law schools and our business school, a lot of their socials involving both students and faculty involve alcohol. And that's what they come together over, and these are things hosted right within the schools. So we've been working with them on, while they may not want to remove the alcohol, what can they do to make the event safer overall so that it's not just an excuse for the students to drink, and what can they do to make sure that there's options available for students who are choosing not to drink.
Another just note on for the folks who put in athletics, as on our campus, we were able to use our National College Health Assessment to dive a little deeper into our athletic community. And what we find is that sometimes there are differences when we look at 30-day use of alcohol versus the question that asks about the last time they drank and how much they drank. And what we kind of hear from athletes is this idea of kind of super restrictions on whether they can drink, for example, when they're in season. So then if they are allowed to drink on one instance, they tend to go a little more extreme. So for example, we see athletes answering the question, the last time I partied or socialized, they're way up there in terms of binge drinking. But in terms of frequency, they're not doing it very often. So the nuances that you can get from working with athletics, having them at the table and using your data to support that, I think is an awesome combination.
Excellent. So moving away from collaborative practice, let us go to standard 4, which is cultural competency. This particular standard may not always seem relevant to alcohol and other drug programming, but every school has its own culture. And there may be specific subcultures within your school that are higher at risk. Some of the ones that we particularly think of regularly, as Sarah was just talking about, could be athletics. We very frequently think about Greek life, so our fraternities and sororities. But really, when you're thinking about cultural competency, consider what makes your campus unique. What myths or things are going on within your campus culture that may be almost encouraging people to drink. I know here we get well, it's New Orleans, and they think of, well, there's the Mardi Gras and people drinking all the time and acting crazy, and that's what school here is going to be like. So we hear this from students filling out assessments for us before they even arrive on campus, that they plan on drinking a lot because that's just the culture here.
So let's let's do another question type in, and if everyone could share a group that they consider to be high risk on their campus. So maybe it's something that's unique to your campus, or it could be one of the examples that we've already given. So high risk populations for alcohol use. So I think we have one. Fraternity and sorority members, club athletes, that's a great one. So not just varsity athletes, but club athletes as well, and first year students.
Someone also asked for you to clarify the question again.
Great. So examples of high-risk populations on your campus can be repeated from what we've said, or could be a population that's really unique to your campus.
Oh, somebody just shared international students.
And first year, first generation students, these are great.
Mm-hmm.
So for international students, we might have to remember that the laws are different for them. So some of our students are coming from places where they were legally able to drink, and they become underage when they get to the US.
I don't know if anybody out there has a strong ROTC program on their campus, but I know we have a ROTC, NROTC, and those are two populations where we have seen some higher risk drinking issues take place.
That's really interesting. Okay, well, feel free to keep going. And I think we've gotten all the ones that have come in. The other populations that we want to think about when we think about the idea of cultural competency are our abstainers. So, so much of our time we spend thinking about, our extremes, our high risk extreme drinkers. But we also want to remember that we may have folks in our community who are choosing to abstain. So some of that could be just a choice. I'm waiting till I'm 21, or I have no interest. It could be, I have a family member who is an alcoholic and I don't, and I'm scared to drink. And it could be someone who's in recovery as well from their own addiction. So just a note to think about our cultural competency when it comes to those folks that, in many ways, we want to praise people that are for choices that are in line with their values, especially those that have great protection for us. So how to encourage our abstinent community and support them while also addressing our high-risk community.
On that note, let's go. Oops, sorry. On to standard 5, which is theory-based practice. So theories can, for most people, be the structure and the glue that holds our initiatives together. It's how we are thinking about putting our initiatives in place. And it can help us know whether or not our programs have succeeded or if they failed. And they can really help us, as it shows in 5.2, it helps us to design our programs. Some of them can give us our framework and our structure, and we're not going to say like these are the best ones, these are the worst ones. There's really no right or wrong answer here. It's finding what works for your program, finding what works for your campus, finding what works for the population that you're currently working with. So, and then as it shows in 5.3, really using all of that information to then create an evaluation, which will actually roll into our next standard, but we'll get to that in a minute. And we wanted to include, you'll see in the bottom, many of you may have the GLANS book, but if you don't, sometimes also referred to as the Purple Book. It is a great kind of primer on health behavior theory, research practice, but you can also look at other areas of theory. Student development theory could also be utilized to create good health promotion programming.
And as promised, we are yet again going to highlight the NIAAA matrix because, as you can see, they actually give you resources for theory within the matrix as you click on some of the interventions. Okay, so moving into Standard 6, we want to talk for a second about the title. So it's evidence-informed practice, and I feel like we may be more familiar with the phrase evidence-based. So in the last revision of the standards, the group chose to move away from evidence-based and move into evidence-informed for a couple reasons. The main one being that an evidence base implies publication and review and dissemination, and sometimes that's not where we are in our practice. You know, sometimes there's a health concern that gets out in front of the research, or there's good stuff going on that we haven't had a chance to publish. So the idea of evidence-informed gives us a little leeway to use practices that have perhaps shown efficacy in a different population, or we could take something that is grounded in evidence in one health topic and try it in another one, or we could work with a practice that's currently being researched or that has shown success on another campus. So the idea of evidence-informed, just being a little more broad than evidence-based, and just reminding us that there is a ton of evidence out there that might not be published for us and ready to go, again, because sometimes the challenges in the field just get ahead of that research.
Thanks, Sarah. And then one of the things that we talk about a little bit in this is needs assessment, which is it can be a population-based assessment, so your entire campus. It could be a very specific population that you're looking at. And there's lots of options out there. Probably some of the best ones known are the NCHA, but lots of schools also do homegrown needs assessments, and this information can have really broad application. It could be used for social norms campaigns. It could be used for basics. A lot of people will use their campus level data during basic sessions to share, hey, this is what the rest of the students on your campus are doing, and this is your behavior, to kind of create some dissonance. And as it says in 6.4, that data can be used as kind of almost a baseline to help create priorities, objectives, goals, and help inform us who our high-risk populations are, and to go all the way back to when I was talking about logic models and strategic planning. This is the information that can be used to help create those logic models and strategic plans.
And while we have been focused a lot on needs and how our needs can shape things like strategic plans, I just want to point out in 6.2 that it's also reminding us to look at our assets. So what about your campus as an asset towards your health promoting efforts as well, which I think sometimes is a little more overlooked. Also remembering that, again, part of the reason that we are using evidence-informed and not evidence-based is the lack of research and publication. So thinking about, for example, with 6.5, if you're not able to implement an initiative with total fidelity to what it was intended to, maybe you then take the time to research that, to ask if it was still effective, and then to disseminate those findings back into the field, which also ties into Standard 7 as well.
Let's skip to the next slide. So Sarah is going to talk a little bit about environmental assessment.
Right, so this was Standard 6.3, so conducting environmental assessments of your campus and community needs, health needs, and resources. So this is a specific example from my campus. I was part of a group that was doing what we called an alcohol culture audit. So we were trying to examine as many different realms of alcohol culture as we could come up with. So we did a wide variety of surveys and focus groups, and really dove into all the data we could get our hands on. But we also did this environmental assessment. So we went to bars adjacent to campus. I know what you're thinking. That's really rough that as part of your workday, you had to go to a bar. But what we found when we went to these bars, we looked at their drink specials, and we had observed that in the span of about 5 years, we had almost doubled our bars in a specific area of campus that was extremely walkable to our students. And then when we went in there and actually honed in on their drink specials, what we found is especially some of these newer bars were offering these incredibly cheap ways to get fairly intoxicated. So I don't know if you can read on the slide, but Jello shooters that were $1, tequila shots for $3, specials every day, that far left board being almost so hard to read because there was so much promotion of specials going on that was helping our students not only drink more, but drink for really cheap. So we were also finding that students on our more quantitative surveys were telling us that they didn't really feel like they were spending a lot of money on alcohol, which was interesting to us, because we know that sometimes that's a hook to get someone to change their behavior. But this was kind of confirmed when we went to these bars. Like, yeah, it makes absolute sense that you're not spending a lot of money, because we have dollar beers and dollar shots and drink specials galore. So our students were able to go to these establishments again, because they're very close, they're actually adjacent to campus, and it gave us a kind of interesting viewpoint of our environment and where we might need to put more efforts to intervene if we really wanted to impact high-risk drinking at William and Mary.
And again, as promised, more from the college AIM. This is one of the tabs. So if you click on, say, an individual level strategy, they'll have references there, and it will tie you back to different peer-reviewed, for the most part, studies that have been done showing the efficacy behind that particular strategy. And most of them then give also information about how they were implemented on the campuses, which may help inform you, if you're interested in doing that particular strategy, how you could best implement it on your own campus.
And we've made it. We're on our last standard, Standard 7. So Standard 7, talking about how to stay up to date in our field, as well as how to contribute back to it. So the good news, if we look at 7.2, you're clearly already doing this. You've been engaged with us for almost an hour now. So you're clearly participating in professional development, which is awesome. And we hope that you have many other opportunities, and we know you do through IHEC. And then also, thinking about some of these as they contribute back to Standard 6 that we just talked about, how by contributing professionally to the field, by looking at things like new interventions or tweaks on existing strategies and disseminating that back to the field, we're actually contributing to our evidence base. So we're helping folks who maybe don't have the resources to do that. We're helping them implement better strategies on their campus as well.
And when we think about ethical principles, consider other things that may apply to you. So if you're in a health center, are you covered by HIPAA? Because you're on a college campus, most likely, you are covered by FERPA. And how does this impact things like basics? How does this impact things like if you have a peer education group doing alcohol workshops out on campus? And then also be considering, are you considered a mandatory reporter on your campus or are you not? So if things come up around sexual violence related to alcohol during these, do you have to report it to the university? So these are just things that, again, to be thinking about, but based on the standards.
So that's what we have for you guys. We want to take a quick second and thank our hosts. But also we tried to leave some time. We have about 10 minutes. So we tried to leave some time for questions. I know it's hard in a webinar when we're speaking and we can't see whether we've lost you on a particular part, for example, because we can't see your faces. So if anyone wants to ask a question, like I said, we have about 10 more minutes for that.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions as we wrap up, go ahead and type them into the little question box. And I want to take this time to thank our speakers as well. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. And for those attendees, thank you for joining us as well. Please keep an eye out for an email that you'll receive about an hour after the webinar from the GoToWebinar platform with a link to a evaluation. It would really help us out if you could fill it out. It helps us with future planning. And keep an eye out on our website and our Facebook page for all of our other continuing ed opportunities that we have. Well, if we don't have any questions, I think we can wrap up this morning's webinar if you guys are all good with that. If any of the attendees come up with anything, maybe after the fact, you can feel free to reach out to me, Emma here at IHEC, and then I can relay that message or get answers for you. Well, thank you so much to our speakers, Alicia and Sarah. I appreciate you presenting for us this morning.
Thank you for
Thanks so
having
much
us.
for you guys,
Yeah.
you for hosting us.
Of course. So everyone, have a good rest of your day. And then we'll end it here. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.